Okay, welcome. We're on part 2 of Workshop 25. So, just as a reminder, so you're able to follow along, this sheet was in part 1, but just to reiterate, you want to go to this website and print out all the source code. Okay, I'll put them in 13 different text files. So that's not in a Python file, it's a text file. If you want to later, that's fine, you can convert those into a Python file and do what I'm doing. But to get them, go to Carry Resources, my website, click on Technology Services, Python program, it's number 8, maybe halfway down. Then go to Download 13 Exercises. This is a zip file, okay? So you're going to open up and that will have all the text files. And again, I would suggest printing those out and following along. Okay, so that's that. Of course, you can always stop the video and if you need to do this on your own. So, okay, so we have 13 coding exercises. This is something else I'll show you. Let's do number 1. Okay, I'm going to open this up, and the way you open it, right click and go to Edit with Idle and enter. Okay, so this, and let me talk about a few things that will be consistent with the other files that I've written. First of all, when you see something with a hash $, in red, that means it's going to, the computer will not read that. Okay, these are it gets commented out. Okay, so this will not be picked up. If you want to comment out an entire section, that's what you do. You do it with 3 quotes here and 3 at the end, 3 at the beginning and 3 at the end. So that comments out that whole section. So that way, or with the single hash. Okay, so this exercise looks at conversion, and there are 4 types of data type. String, which are words, integers, of course numbers, float are numbers with decimals, so 5.20 is a float number, and Boolean. So it's denoted as B-O-O-L, bool, and that is either a true or false statement. It renders a true or false. Okay. This is some reminders that we'll talk about in a second. So what we're doing here is we set up some code. This is the code here. Okay. We have a variable. Okay. So variable equals, and it's asking for an input, and the input is suggesting to enter a whole number, and that has to be in quotes, single or double, but be consistent. Okay, and if you notice here, I leave a space between the semi and the quote. That will actually, you'll see when the code is run, it will leave a space so that you can enter the number. Okay, it won't be all jammed up. So this is a variable, num2. Remember, for variables, they can be anything. They can be anything except the following. You cannot start with a number, you cannot have space, and you can't use some of the Python built-in words for a variable, meaning print would not be a variable, okay? Because that's something the program actually uses. So we have 2 variables, and you're going to input that when it runs. Total, that variable, is going to actually lump those together, concatenate them, okay? And because they are strings, technically it's not going to add, if that's 10 and that's 20, it's not going to deliver 10 plus 20 is 30. It's going to deliver as one word, basically. you'll see them kind of mashed together. So it's going to print, it's going to output, it's going to say total is whatever that is. And then it's going to tell us what type of data. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So let's run that. Run. It says enter a whole number. You see where it gave it a little space. So by doing this little space here, that makes it one spaced out. Okay, so 20. Okay, enter, and I'll do this so you can see the code. Enter another whole number, 30. So before I hit enter, it's not going to deliver the number 50, the addition. It's just going to deliver 20 and 30 mashed together. Okay, so it's treating that as a string. What's the class? String. Okay. Okay, let's get rid of that. Now let's say we want to convert that over to a number. Okay, so these numbers will be a string. If we want to convert them to integers or floating, we need to do something with it. Okay, and I commented these out for a second. This is some more code, so I'm going to remove that. Now let's guess what it's going to do. It's going to run this again. It's going to jump over this red stuff, and then it's going to take the total again, convert those into integers. So int, whatever num1 is, whatever we enter here, it's now going to be converted to an integer. Num2 is also going to be converted into an integer. Okay, then it's going to add up the total. So it's going to print the total. So in this case, it's going to be a mathematical calculation. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. We'll say 50. Okay, so the first part of the code, it takes 20 and 50 and just concatenates them and gets 2050. So it thinks it's treating that as a string, same thing as a word. Then it jumps down here and then runs it again, but turns that into an integer. And now it's 70. Okay? So that's that. As we go through each of these, it will become more intuitive, easier. The same principle, same logic will be applied. Okay. So now this one, open that one up. Okay, let's see what this one does. This is actually, if you're on the call, if you're watching this, this was someone, a patron from the second class, asked if we can go the other way around. If we can have it as an integer, turn that into a string. And we just basically flip-flop everything. So that's what we're doing here. So again, we have the 4 types of data. Okay, we're going to enter num1 and num2, those are the variables. We're going to enter a number as an input. Okay, so that input, that word prompts the user to do something. But whatever that something is, by the prefix int will convert it into an integer. So then the total will come up, let's say 10 plus, let's say 20 will be 30. So that's going to be a mathematical equation. Then it's going to convert it back to a string. And you do the same way. Total, num1, okay, it's an integer. We convert it to a string for 1 and 2, and then print it. Okay? So let me I'm going to comment these out for a second so you can see the first part of the code run. Okay, so it's going to run this. See what that looks like. Enter a whole number, 10, enter another, 40. 10 plus 40 is 50. It's an integer. Okay, now let's go back. I'm going to uncomment this because this is actually more code. This is a comment. These are just notes that for you as the student, if you will, what I'm doing. Okay, so let's run this again. Enter a whole number, 10, another, 50, let's do 40. Now when I hit enter, it's going to run both parts of the code. It's going to make it an integer, so 50, and then it's going to move down the page, and then it's going to convert it into a string. Okay, so first time it adds it as an integer, then it turns it into a string. So you can just follow the code here. All this is that, and then all this down here is this. Okay? I think it was Tony that made that suggestion. Tony, if you're listening, thanks. Okay. Boolean, okay. He was a mathematician. Okay. Okay, so up top is what we are doing. This is the explanation basically. So these are 3 quotes. So this is commented out because we have before, after, and before. So we're looking at operators. So this is just, you guys probably know all this. 2 equal signs bunched together, and it cannot be like this. You can't have any white space in this case. It's one of the exceptions. Okay, that has to be together. That means equality. A exclamation mark and an equals is inequality. This we all know from grade school. Greater than, less than, greater than or equal to. A little misspelling here. Let me fix that. Sorry about that. This is less than or equal to. Okay, those we know. These are probably new to you. Okay, now the variables. We have the variable called null, and that equals 0. The variable called number, that is also 0. High equals 1. Cap equals the string large cat, large A. And no cap equals little a. And you see, that's a variable, but it has to have that underscore. It cannot be blank. Okay, so we're going to test. I'm going to print out a couple tests to see what happens. So we have these 5. So the first one, we're going to print null. Okay, so null equals 0. It's a null. Is it equality to, remember, this, equality. So it's an equality station operator. Does it equal? And by the way, it's 2 equal signs because this equal is a variable, meaning this is associated. This variable contains this. Okay, so that's one thing in computer programming. You have to really keep that in mind. This is a variable. Anything, think of that as a box, and anything can be in that box. In this box, we call it null, and it happens to have the number 0 in it. This box is called number, and it has 0 in it, so forth, okay? 2 together is the equal, what we think of, in grade school, 5 equals 2 plus 3. That's how we know the equal sign. But in computer programming language, it's different. Double equals. Okay, so null 0 is equal to 0. So null equals number. And that's going to deliver a Boolean, either true or false. Okay. Here's a little note. Okay. This one, print cap, is big A, is equal to the no cap, the little a. So cap equals no cap. That should be a false, right? Those two do not equal, so this statement should render false, and so forth. So here, null does not equal, that exclamation mark means does not equal, so null 0, okay, does not equal 1. That should be true. 0 does not equal 1. So that should be a false. Sorry about that. Here, null is greater than, 0 is greater than high, which is 1. That null, 0 is greater than 1. No, that should be false. Here, 0 is less than 1. That should be true. Okay, so that's a Boolean. Let's see what that looks like. Let's run it. And it tells us what happened. 0 is equal to 0, yes. Big A is equal to little a, no, false, and so forth. Okay, so that's that. Okay. Next is testing. Okay, let's see what we have here. Okay. So, this one, again, we have, whoops. Okay, again, just to remind you, the three quotes, all this has been commented out, so the computer does not pick up on it. It's really just for your notes. So what we're doing here, this can get a little weird. It's the if and else, if else. Very common in computer language. In basic terms, okay, another typo. Basic terms, it means if true, then do something. If otherwise, do this. Else, false. Okay, then do this. So false was a typo in your text file. Just check that out. That was a late catch. So if else, if I get food, I'll be satisfied, else I'll be hungry. That's really what that means. Okay. So let's get a simple example. Variable A equals 1. Variable B equals the number 2. Okay. So we're going to set up a print statement. 1, okay. It's going to print 1 if, and only if, A 1 is equivalent to 1. So if A, which is 1, is equivalent to 1. Otherwise, else, it will print not 1. Okay, next one, it's going to print 1 if and only if B equals 1. If B, which happens to contain 2 in its box, if you will, 2 equals, we know that's false, else not 1. So this is going to print 1. This is false, so it's going to print the else, the not 1. Okay, and one more little just way to use this. If we make library a variable and we say that if this equals A, okay, so library equals A if A is greater than B, else B. So what's it going to print? It's going to print the answer. The answer to all this is here. So let's think about it. If A represents 1, so 1 is going to be the answer if 1 is greater than B. Otherwise, B. Okay, so it's going to print B because 1 is not greater than 2. Okay, so let's run this code and see what happens. And then you can just, what I like to do, if you have the code, you can, the output, just put it next to the code and you can see what's happening. Okay, so this printed 1 and this printed not 1. And this printed the number 2. Okay, so it doesn't print B, but it prints what's in the box called B. Okay, so library, so box A is greater than box B. Do we know it's not? Else, print box B, whatever's in box B. And 2 is in box B, variable B, so it delivers 2. See how long this has been going? 1 second here, guys. 22 minutes. Okay, so we're fine. I think we'll do one more and then stop and then make another, because I think actually to process this and then post it on YouTube, it takes a long time. So we'll do one more. So this one's list. Okay. Right click, let's open it up here. Okay, this one, whoops, let's pull this out. Now, list, again, here we are, 3 commas, 3 quotes, all this is commented out. Now, when you have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, think of this as position. I put a note here. Think of the 1 as really in position 1. Number 2 is actually in position 2. Position 3, 4, and 5. Okay. These could also be. This could be the number. I could put the number 10 is in position 1. The number 20 is in position 2, and so forth. So I just happen to use 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, the computer wants to index these by a certain index classification. And the first position is always index 0. Okay, so if I say if I say print index 0, it's going to print the first. So index 0 is always the first position. That's a very key thing in computer programming. So let's look at a couple of examples. If I have a list, and a list, by the way, is in brackets, okay? So we have the month, this is the variable, month equals January, February, and March. Okay, those have to be in quotes. They're strings, and separated by commas. Okay, so remember, strings need to be in quotes, either single or double quotes, but be consistent. Another variable is called location, and within location are two lists. One list is this, second list is that. Okay, and if we want to give them an index location, this would be 0, second one would be 1. Okay, and again, that's something that you just have to absorb and think about and work with it enough, and then it starts to make sense. But if we look at example, it'll help. So if we have this code here, now we want to print the location. Okay, so it's going to print we're looking here. Okay, print location. We want to go to the first index, so 1, index 1, which would be not here, but here. This is index 0, this is index 1. So we want to print at least in index 1, something in here. Then the next location is within index 1, the second index within that index. So it's a nested index. Okay, so first we find 1, and then the second index within that. So this would be 0, 1, 2. So that should print out the number 6. Okay, let's look at the next one. Print. We want to print the month, so this is what we're working with right now, all this. The variable month, it's the second index. So index 2 would be January is 0, February is 1, March is 2. Remember, the first position is always going to be index 0. Okay, so month, so it's going to print March, and then within that, the first index, 1, which would be the letter M is 0, letter A is 1, R is 2, and so forth. So it's asking for 1, so it's going to print the letter A. Okay, now let's run the code. Run it. Okay, so let's see if we were correct. It's delivering 6 and A. So 6, okay, print the location, first index, and then the second. Okay, next one, printing the month. It's going to go to the second, which is somewhere here, and then within that, the first index, which is 0, 1, which is the letter A. Okay, so that was, we ended off at number 5, and we'll pick up with 6.